Today is the 8th day of Adar, and it's also March 1st, and we are actually up to the 4th reading of Tetzaveh, but I'd like to go a little bit back to yesterday's reading. And yesterday we began the second and third readings. They start talking about the special garments of the high priest. So we started with the ephod, which is a type of cloak. Very hard to translate exactly what it is, but you may find pictures of it. Then there's the breastplate, which is basically a very complex ornament that the high priest wore on his chest, and the ephod and the breastplate were connected to one another. Above that, or under that rather, he had a robe, and there was a forehead plate. Forehead plate is like a plate of gold that he wore a little bit in the same way that we wear tefillin. He also had tefillin on above them. The forehead plate was around here, and it had inscribed on it the words consecrated to God, meaning belonging to God. Above that, he had a tunic, and he had a turban. And he also had a sash, which is like a belt. In today's reading, in yesterday's reading with the description of the tunic, there's or the cloak, I think, is how they usually they call it the robe. So in Hebrew, it's the me'il. The me'il is very interesting because on the bottom, it had a very elaborate scheme of little bells and pomegranates. The bells were made out of gold, the pomegranates were made out of gold. You can find the pictures of it, and it's actually been reproduced today. So what we want to talk about is the spiritual significance of these clothing that the high priest had. And to understand that, we're going to read a passage from the Talmud, and this passage is in the tractate called Arachin, and it's on folio 16a. I'm going to read it directly in English with Rabbi Steinsaltz's intercalated explanation. The Gemara asks a certain question, and why was the passage in the Torah that discusses the priestly vestments juxtaposed to the passage that discusses offerings? So, in truth, this is actually not in our parsha. This is from the book of Leviticus. Chapters 1-7 discuss the different types of sacrifices. And then chapter 8 in Leviticus describes Moses putting the garments on Aaron. So the Gemara is asking, why are they juxtaposed? Why are they one near the other? They didn't have to be, because you could discuss the sacrifices anywhere. So the answer is to tell you that just as offerings atone, just as the sacrifices atone for various sins, so too the priestly vestments atone. And then the Gemara says, oh, that's very interesting. So you're telling me that each one of these 8 garments atones for a certain type of sin. Meaning the very fact that the high priest was in the temple and was wearing these and was serving God with these served as an atonement, just as the sacrifices that were brought by the entire congregation, like the daily sacrifices, atone for sins as well. So the Gemara asks, the Talmud asks, for what does each garment atone? So it says like this: the tunic, the ketonet, atones for bloodshed, as it is written with regard to Joseph's brothers after they plotted to kill him, and they killed a goat and dipped the coat, the kutonet, Joseph's ketonet pasim, his multicolored coat, in the blood. So the coat, the tunic that the high priest wears, atones for bloodshed. The trousers, he had trousers underneath, atone for forbidden sexual relations, as it is written with regard to the priestly vestments, and you shall make them linen trousers to cover the flesh of their nakedness. So covering the flesh of the nakedness, lechasot besar erva, the nakedness is a translation for erva, which is the Hebrew word in the Torah used for improper relations. The mitre, what is the mitre? The mitre is the hat, the turban that he wore, atones for the arrogant, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Chanina. As Rabbi Chanina says, it is logical that an item placed at an elevation, that is, on the head of a priest, shall come and atone for the matter of an elevated heart. So here we see something very interesting, that heart does not always mean necessarily the organ inside our chest. Sometimes heart actually means the brain. And this is a big topic in Jewish anatomy, if you want. How to exactly identify where the soul is, for instance. So most of the time we say that the soul is in the brain, it's in the head. But many times you also hear that the soul is in the heart, and actually the innermost part of the soul is in the heart. So again, it's a big topic, but in principle, the anatomy of the ancients was not looked upon the way that we look upon anatomy. We like to identify each organ with a specific task. They didn't exactly have that type of relationship to the body. In any case, so here we have that the arrogance is on the turban, on the mitre as he calls it, and that's the mitre atones for arrogance in people. The belt atones for the thought of the heart. Here we see again that the heart here is thinking. The Gemara elaborates, the belt atones for the sins occurring where it is situated, that is, over the heart, as it is written, and you shall put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and Tumim, and it shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. And Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before the Lord continually. So what do we have here? That the belt separates, divides between what is above the belt and what is below the belt. And so what he's saying here is that the belt, because it's atoning for everything that's above, is actually atoning for the different feelings that a person has in his heart. It could be feelings of infidelity, anything that it might be, that the belt does that. That's also one of the reasons, not the main reason, but one of the reasons that you'll see that Hasidim always have a belt, a special belt, when they pray, to separate between the higher and the lower parts of the torso. Then the Gemara continues, the breastplate of the high priest atones for improper judgments, as it is written. So now we get to the breastplate, before we were talking about the belt. Now it's a breastplate. The breastplate was used to judge. And we can't get into all the details, but there were many questions that were brought before God, in the sense that the king, together with the high priest, would stand before the Holy of Holies. They would ask the question, and then the king, or the prophet sometimes, or the third person, would look at the breastplate, and he would be able to see from the letters that were shining what the answer was. In any case, the breastplate of the high priest atones for improper judgments, as it is written, and you shall make a breastplate of judgment. The ephod, again, this is the long robe that we were talking about before, of the high priest, atones for idol worship. Sorry, it's the garment that goes behind and ties to the breastplate, atones for idol worship, as it is written, and without ephod or trophim. That is to say, when there is no ephod, the sin of trophim, idol worship, is found. In other words, what does the ephod do? The ephod guards the backside. The understanding is that all idolatry is, in a certain sense, a derivative of feeling that I'm being chased from behind. I don't have something protecting me from behind. That's why it's called lo tatu'u acharei levavchem. You should not follow the hind part of your heart. That's not the literal meaning, but the way it's almost literal. It's the way that you would understand it. That when you feel that you're not protected from the backside, which means that you don't feel accepted by God in a certain sense, that's when you fall into idolatry, and you look for something else that will protect you in the hindsight, and that's ephod. By the way, the hindsight always is a symbol for the subconscious, and that needs a lot of discussion exactly how that is. In any case, the ephod atones for idol worship. Finally, the robe, which is what, not finally, there's one more after that, but the robe is what we wanted to talk about. The robe of the high priest atones for malicious speech. As the Holy Blessed One says, let an item that produces sound, that is the bells of the robe, come and atone for an act of malicious sound. Malicious sound is lashon hara, when a person speaks ill of someone else. Now, it's very interesting that the image here of the bell making sounds is very explicit. What exactly is there a bell? So I looked up before we started this class what the parts of the bell are called in English. So it's actually like this, that the interior of the bell is called the mouth, and the thing that rings, that hits the mouth and hits the bell from side to side, I would have thought that in English they would have called it a tongue, but they don't. In English it's called a clapper. But interestingly, the thinnest part of the bell, which is where the sound is produced, is called a lip. So very clearly also in English, the bell is like a mouth. The whole idea is that the tongue inside our mouth is like the clapper that's making the sounds within our mouth. And our sounds, since they are up to us, we decide what we want to say and what not to say. So they sometimes are malicious speech, that they're lashon hara, that they're the negative things that we're not supposed to say. And the sound that was made by the bells in the robe of the high priest atoned for that. Interestingly, we'll just end with this one point. The word bell in Hebrew is pa'amun. It's spelled pei ayin mem nun. The gematria, the numerical value of that word, is 240. It says in the book of Judges that when Samson began to feel prophecy coming through him, he felt the Spirit of God. The word is mefa'emet bekirbo, which is usually translated as resonating within him. But it's actually the same root as pa'amon, same root as a bell. So in a sense, what he felt was that the Spirit of God was like shaking inside of him, like a clapper, forcing him to act in a certain way. He felt it like a bell would feel that it's being rung. So he was ringing in his mind with the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God is also equal exactly to 240, the same word, the same value as the word for bell. Another interesting relationship. Hopefully when I'll be in Los Angeles, we'll get a chance to explore this in a lot more depth, because we'll have it a second time in Parashat Vayakel Pekudei. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.